Today on the MrMaple Show podcast, Matt and Tim count down the top 20 Japanese maples for small gardens.
Konnichiwa, y'all, and welcome to another Mr. Maple podcast. I'm Matt Nichols. That's my brother, Tim Nichols.
Hey, y'all. Today, we're bringing you the top 20 Japanese maples for small gardens. We know many of y'all are just getting into growing Japanese maples, and y'all probably have a smaller garden. So we're going to talk about 20 Japanese maples that'll be perfect for you.
Now, these are some trees that are frequently found on Mr. Maple, so these are some ones that should be easy to access. We love making trees available, so if you will, shop with us at MrMaple.com. It's a great way to support the podcast we do. Let's get into it at number 20. We've got a narrow selection that fits great in the small area garden. We've got Tsukasa Silhouette.
Tsukasa Silhouette is an upright, narrow Japanese maple by our friend Yataka Tanaka in Japan, Tsukasa maple. And it has this really narrow shape and some really good fall color.
Now, this works great because in the small garden, as we get less and less space, sometimes we still want some verticality. We want something with a little bit of reach that's going to expand the garden room. You know, I think one of the best ways to look at some of these tall columnar plants is they bring the eye upward. They evoke a little bit different emotions. Sometimes we still want a tall cathedral going on in our garden, even though we don't have a lot of space. Tsukasa Silhouette's a great way to achieve that tall, skinny look.
And it's easy for many people to grow. It's fairly heat tolerant. And Tsukasa Silhouette fits in that small garden because it doesn't take up a lot of space. It doesn't get a lot of width to it. It stays with that narrow columnar habit, making it easy for people to use in the landscape and garden. But Tsukasa Silhouette, it's one of those trees that can, really just give some dynamic fall color out there and stay in that smaller space.
Going to work zones 5 through 9, typically around 10 to 12 foot tall. A 10 to 12 foot tall tree, especially if grown in a good amount of sunlight and grown, I do prune it when it's young to take out any low branching that's multi-branched. That's always a good key for keeping this one more narrow. You don't want a ton of multi-branching going on, which is easy to achieve on a young plant. But keeping a good central strong leader on this one, typically this one is only around 4, maybe even 5 feet wide in a 10-foot span. So great for that more narrow. We've seen this used in Hendersonville as a street tree. Even here, we recommended that to the city of Hendersonville after seeing it used as a street tree in Japan. So a great tree for small area gardens to still get some vertical interest, to still bring that room of the garden up. Sometimes you want to bring the eye up in the garden. You don't want everything to be so small. And that's a great one for a small garden that still has some height.
And one thing to note about Tsukasa Silhouette, giving it more sunlight will keep it more narrow. In a more shaded location, you may get a little more width to it as it's stretching out, trying to look for the sunlight. So keep that in mind. Guys, coming at number 19, we've got a classic. It's one of the best mid-sized upright Japanese maples that has that red color. Number 19, we've got Acer Palmatum Fireglow.
Now, our idea on this wasn't picking the smallest Japanese maples, because if we were just picking the tiniest trees, Fireglow wouldn't be on the list. But it's one of the best small upright reds for a small garden space. So if you got a backyard, maybe you're on a half acre and you're not looking to have a tree that's going to be 25 foot. Fireglow is one of the perfect trees to kind of put in there because typically around 8 to 10 foot. So a mid-sized tree, great to evoke great fall colors, great spring colors, holds that red late into the season, but it doesn't get so big that it's going to outgrow a small area garden.
And when we talk about sizes, we're typically talking about a 10-year size time frame, and that's because the term maturity or a garden size is kind of made up because a tree grows every single year. And Fireglow is that mid-sized tree. It's got a slow to moderate growth rate, giving you that good red color. But if you plant Fireglow where it gets morning sun or afternoon sun, it has like an orange glow to the backside of the leaf. So when you're looking up from underneath it, it glows. And that's where it gets fire glow. And it is amazing. To me, it's one of the best red uprights. And it's got some phenomenal bright fire engine red fall colors.
Yeah, you can put this out and expect to have a tree that you can stand in the shade of, but not a tree that's going to, overgrow your home and garden. So it's not going to be something that's bigger than your house. Great for that mid-size to small garden. All right, coming in here at number 18, we've got Peve Starfish. This is Acer Palmatum Peve Starfish. Really fun plant, typically in that 6 to 7 foot range. Really interesting small upright to add texture to the garden. So again, not a gigantic plant, but a tree that's going to come in there, give you some different feels for the garden, different textures for the garden. Each little leaf kind of looks like a starfish.
I can't think help but think about our cultivar highlight we did on this, where you say they call it a starfish because it looks like a starfish.
I think I beat that point home in that one. Good.
You beat it dead. And if you like cultivar highlights or learning about Japanese maples, you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform right now, check us out on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube. We put out daily videos there on YouTube, some about our 10 at 10 listings, and then some about cultivar highlights and other advice about growing Japanese maples. So if you're just getting started, you're going to definitely want to check that out.
So Talon Buchholz was walking by this tree in Piet Vergelt's evaluation block in Holland, and he said, that looks like a starfish. And it kind of stuck. Piet Vergelt took that name and ran with it. Years later, Talon said, oh, I see you named one starfish. He said, well, you named it. So Talon kind of was a little influential on there. Piet Vergelt likes to put his signature on there. As many of you know, if you're longtime listeners, we talk about that a lot. You'll see Peve at the beginning of his trees. Piet Vergelt named this one Peve Starfish, and it really is the perfect name because it kind of captures what it does, but also adds value to the plant. I like when a name adds something to the plant. This is a tree that when you talk about it with children, they're going to remember that it looked like a starfish. They're going to want to go back out and check on the starfish in the garden.
And it's not just that it has that leaf that looks like a starfish. I mean, texturally, it's really interesting. It's very claw-like and stoic out there in the garden, which is really nice as well. And being a small to mid-sized red upright, it fits in everyone's gardens as well.
At that 6 foot range too, this has great fall color, really underrated for that pink red fall color, really elevated fall color. So this is one you can have in a container, but also looks great in the ground in a place where you don't have room for, a giant bloodgood or something like that. Peve Starfish, great way to do it. And it's going to give you a smaller, interesting texture to pair with the other plants. Like this looks great next to about anything. And you're going to have a Japanese maple that has a little something outside the box, something a little bit more unique.
Now, guys, coming in next, we've got a pink Japanese maple. At number 17, we've got Geisha Gone Wild.
Yeah, this is another tree named and found by Talon Buchholz. It's a reoccurring sport off the cultivar Geisha. Geisha Gone Wild, classic for so many reasons. I mean, this one, more durable than Geisha, oddly enough. It's a weird case where the sport's actually a little faster than Geisha, but it can handle a little bit more sun. Now, this is typically 5 to 6 foot tall. Again, most of the trees we're talking about here are going to work zones 5 through 9. I'll let you know if there any variation to that. But this one's another one's going to be zones 5 through 9. Durable, heat tolerant, a great pink variegated plant that can handle a decent amount of sun for us here in the south. Small vase shaped upright though. My favorite stage is when it's got more of the pink on green going on. You kind of get a little bit more of that late summer. Early spring though, red on pink, really a showstopper.
I was asking my wife to do a cultivar highlight for a Japanese maple, and she said, I really like the pink one. Can I do Geisha Gone Wild? So she actually introduced our cultivar highlight on Geisha Gone Wild on the Mr. Maple Show channel on YouTube. And it's dynamic. I mean, the pink spring color is unreal. It looks like something from a Dr. Seuss book. It looks like something from the Lorax. The pink color is just insane. It seems like something that's unreal, the way how pink it can actually be. I mean, a tree that can be this pink, who knew that could happen, in your garden? I mean, that's just awesome. And then the fall color is that pink red in the fall that is just extremely dynamic. The strong upright habit makes it a really nice tree for the garden to really show off that pink color. And it can really just be glossy and shiny out there in the garden.
So guys, coming in here at number 16, we've got another classic. We're going to one of our first lace leaves on the list. Now, this is what a lot of people think of as far as Japanese maples for small gardens. We've got Acer palmatum waterfall. Now, one caveat, I'll give it waterfall / Veritas. We did find out in Veritree's archives that he says they're the same plant. So interesting little caveat there. I do think that could be the case now. Waterfall, though, great for that small area garden. Also, it's got the name waterfall, so it kind of evokes that garden water flowing theme going on. Kind of works really well with Japanese gardening. Waterfall is a green lace leaf. It's going to typically be 4 to 5 feet tall, 5 to 6 foot wide, even in a 15-year span. So a low cascading umbrella goes from that bright chartreuse green to a Kelly green midsummer, and then golden yellows to oranges in the fall. So you get a lot of color change. This one's also exceptionally heat tolerant. So with waterfall and Veritas being, both synonymous trees, one of the reasons we go with waterfall is because Veritas has become to represent a group of greens. So a lot of times Veritas can be like Atroporum, and it can mean a wider range of things. And waterfall is a specific cultivar in that group, so we kind of feel that supersedes the Veritas name. Now, we still list Veritas on our website. You'll see we say they are the same now. We always keep them listed separately just to make sure. But we have found over time, I believe, that they have become the same tree in the trade, even if at one point they were not.
Now, everyone always thinks about a lace leaf as the traditional thought of a Japanese maple. But in the United States, people often track down the red lace leaf and then they want to put it in front of their dark home, and that cascading habit, and the tree gets lost. something like a waterfall is going to give you that green color. It's going to give dynamic contrast with the backdrop of a darker house and really stand out and give a more summery, lively feel in the garden. So waterfall is an excellent tree for those small gardens.
Also a tree you can keep in a container for quite a while. So, works great in a small garden in a pot as well. So coming in here, number 15, we've got Acer Shirosaulam Autumn Moon. Now, this is a fun one for the container or in the ground. Slower growing Acer Shirosaulam. You get a lot of fun oranges on this one in the early spring. That's kind of where it gets that autumn moon, is that orange hue, those big October moons. You call them the harvest moons sometimes. Those giant moons that have that bold orange to them. We get that a lot here in North Carolina, especially in late fall. Beautiful time of the year. And autumn moon really evokes that kind of feel. It's got a large Shirosaulam leaf. If you give this some early morning sun in the early spring, you could definitely get some of those bold oranges going on. And then the fall is a bold orange to red too.
Now, in most climates, I'd recommend giving protection from the hot afternoon sun for autumn moon for the best growth rate, the best colors, and the health of the plant. But autumn moon with those full moon-like leaves and that sort of malting it has across the leaf, it's great for the small garden. We're talking 6 foot in 10 years. And so you're talking about 6 inches of growth in a year. It's slow. It's awesome. It's great for containers. Make sure you've got good drainage as well. But autumn moon is one of the most beautiful Japanese maples for small gardens.
All right, guys, coming here at number 14, we've got Acer Palmatum dissectum Orangiola. I love this one. Orangiola is super durable. It's one of the more colorful lace leaves. I absolutely love this one in container. One of my favorite characteristics of Orangiola is that it is more bell-shaped than umbrella-shaped. So we talk about a lot of these lace leaves having a little bit more of that umbrella cascade to them. This one's almost on that like Ryusen level pendulous. So you get a shape that kind of weeps down more than width. So it's pretty unique in that characteristic. There's a lot of things to love about this one. It's probably one of our more requested lace leaves now.
Yeah, Orangiola, it's just a classic lace leaf that is, like you're mentioning, is becoming one of the most popular trees in the trade because people love the color changes it goes throughout the seasons. And it's such a beautiful tree with one of the most heavily cascading and pendulous habits of any of those weeping lace leaves. And so because of that, people often will stake it up and let it just cascade straight downward. It is really beautiful. It's easy to grow. It's fairly heat tolerant. And the color changes of just the bright orange reds and then the multitude of colors you get during the summer where it's like green with those orange red new growth coming across it. It is a next level weeping lace leaf. And because of that heavily cascading habit, it doesn't get too tall. So it makes it perfect for that smaller garden.
Beautiful colorations on this. Super durable. Handles a good bit of sun. And really, all around, just kind of one of the perfect plants, in my opinion. I like it a lot for the midsummer interest. I talk about that a lot. Great fall colors, great spring colors. It's going to fit in a garden really nice, too, if you already have something like a waterfall and a Tamukiyama. You've already got, kind of your more common lace leaf and then a green. Gosh, think about Orangiola. I like Orangiola almost as a primary tree to then pair waterfall with because it's so different and unique, and you get a little bit different color pattern. So for me, it's a no-brainer that it's one of like the perfect lace leaves.
Now, coming at number 13, we're cheating a little bit on this list because this one is technically a native to the United States. It's not technically an Acer palmatum or a Japanese maple. It's not even a Japanese maple hybrid. We're talking about Acer circinatum Little Jim. This was a witch's broom that was found by Lean Cook and taken and introduced in the trade by J.D. Vertrees. One of the many trees that J.D. Vertrees introduced, like Autumn Moon that we were talking about earlier, he introduced a lot of really cool selections, and he doesn't even get credit for many of them. Little Jim, it's a compact form of a dwarf mutation called a witch's broom or a blessing that they find on some trees like Japanese maples and Acer circinatum, which is the indigenous tree that's closely related to a Japanese maple, the Acer palmatum, and is found in that Oregon, Washington, California area. Really awesome if you go back to the Lewis and Clark expedition. Persh actually spotted that and actually recorded it as Acer circinatum for the first time during that Lewis and Clark expedition. And there's like a print of the leaf, like in some museums, where he made a print of it as they're on the Lewis and Clark expedition. So pretty awesome. Circinatums have some amazing fall colors, oranges and reds, and Little Jim, it does that in that compact form.
Typically only 3 to 4 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide, more of a small globe shape, very multi-stemmed from the graft in a 10-year period. Beautiful plant. Vertrees was fascinated with circinatums. I think his goal was to eventually find a North American replica of the Japanese maple and find as much genetics there as we could in Japanese maples. Now you find more cool genetics within Japanese maples, but it's certainly fun to have this North American native in the mix. Very unique plant, great leaf shape, just great plant. Now this one's going to work zone 6 through 9. Really colorful fall colors, like Tim was saying. It's not uncommon to get reds, oranges, and yellows all at the same time. Little Gem looks great in a container as well. And fun way to mix it up, get a Circinatum here on the list. Certainly smaller in its habit. Certainly if you want to try a Circinatum, it's a great one to experiment with in your landscape and get some different textures going on.
Yeah, I mean, Acer Circinatum, I remember at the Maple Society when we were going through Mount St. Helens area with Sue Weagroff, and we saw the Circinatum in the wild, in fall color, and it's just like, wow, this is a next level tree. Circinatums, I've learned, they want some protection from the hot afternoon sun in most climates. So Little Gem, for the smaller gardens, make sure you give them some protection from the hot afternoon sun, but also, like many dwarf Japanese maples, make sure you have good drainage. Good drainage is essential when you're growing your Japanese maples, and it helps the tree really thrive and do well.
All right, guys, coming in here at number 12, we've got another columnar tree. We've got TRS, the Twombly's Red Sentinel. Twombly's Red Sentinel is a great red upright and one of the quintessential columnar Japanese maples. Now, we talked about this with Sukasa, but it's the perfect way to add vertical interest in the garden and create that upward feel, especially in a small garden. You got something where you don't have a lot of width for space, but you want some height. Twombly's Red Sentinel is going to do that and also give you some beautiful reds. Mimics a little bit of that of Fire Glow. You get a lot of deep color changes. Holds the color very well, and then a bright picked up red, almost pink red in the fall. Exceptionally heat tolerant. There's not a lot of things you can go wrong with Twombly's Red Sentinel. I mean, make sure it's got good drainage. And it's one of those trees that's really going to perform in the landscape.
And it's a pillar of color. It's been fairly heat tolerant for us, and it fits in that small footprint in the garden, but just gives you that flagpole of that bright cherry red to maroon. And so it gives you that verticality, but also color, which is really awesome in a Japanese maple. It was found as a dwarf mutation, where they thought, by Ken Twombly, and then as it matured out, it turned out not to be a witch's broom that people think of, like some of the other small witch's brooms. It stayed tight and dense and had that narrow habit. And he said it looked like a red sentinel out there. It's interesting, when I talked to Ken Twombly, he said that in Connecticut, some people are using them as a deciduous hedge because they don't take up a lot of the room, but then they can give you some amazing red color, which I thought was an interesting and unique way to use a Japanese maple.
Absolutely beautiful plant. So many great uses for it. Again, you can grow this in a container for quite a while, then switch it to the small ground landscape, or just start out in the landscape right away. It's a perfect tree for a small area garden where you want color, but you also want height. So it's not going to rob you of the height, but it's going to provide that more narrow footprint in the small garden. And that's what we're looking at today, is plants that are going to fit, in small spaces. And as gardeners, we're always running out of room. And Twombly's really fits the bill so well for not giving you a ton of width, but it really brings the pop for color, height, and for dramatic color change throughout the seasons.
Now, coming to number 11, we've got a classic Japanese maple. And when I mean classic, this is a Japanese maple that was listed in the 1700s. It is an amazing selection. We're talking about Shishigashira, and translates as the lion's head Japanese maple.
Yeah, beautiful plant. Been around, like you said, since the 1700s. So it's been fitting a lot of small area gardens. Now, this is a beautiful tree that has very unique foliage. It has, if you're familiar with this one, you know it. It's a classic, but it has that kind of ruffled leaf look to it and a dark evergreen color. It doesn't really match any other Japanese maple for fall color. Or for spring color. It's a darker green than most of the other Japanese maples. And then it goes to a very unique fiery orange with red and yellow throughout it in the fall. So it really is unlike most other trees. I can't think of many other Japanese maples that would fit that color pattern for that darker evergreen too. Like, it has an evergreen, so it's deciduous, but it has an evergreen type color to it, especially in the spring. So showy. That one that's been used for bonsai for hundreds of years because of that small habit, but also that thick density to it. One, you can get a lot of color change and a lot of dynamic interest in a small area garden.
Yeah, I mean, for that small garden, it has a very stoic a presence where it gets thick branching. It has just a unique upright structure, and the leaves are small and real close to the actual branches. The dark green color is a color you don't get on many other plants in the landscape, and the texture with that ruffled leaf really gives it something really interesting. And they say that, the texture and the fall color is where it looks like a lion's mane. Now, Shishi was actually a mythological lion in Japanese literature, And so it's basically talking about a female lion from Japanese literature, but it is an amazing Japanese maple, and it stood the test of time. It's easy for people to grow. It's proven itself to be heat tolerant, durable. Again, you want to make sure you give it good drainage, but it's been able to handle sun in a lot of situations, which has really impressed me, even in areas like Columbia, South Carolina, which is one of our areas where it's really hot. I mean, they often advertise it's the new hot spot. It's been really hot there for numerous years.
I see that on billboards, and I'm like, that's not a marketing to get me to go to Columbia.
I think about being
Columbia, the new hot spot. I'm like, oh. I think about my sunglasses melting in the console. That's what I think about when I go Columbia. But my cousins did have this one in front of a brick house in clay in Columbia.
Full sun.
Yeah, and it's durable as all get out. You'll be shocked at how resilient Shishigashira is. Just an all-around great plant. And again, 6 to 8 foot in 10 years. You can see some bigger ones because trees never quit growing. So you go to Japan or Holland, I saw a 40-foot Shishigashira in Holland, but the thing was like 300 years old. It was one of the old, it's at Arboretum Trompenberg. There's a massive one there. But yeah, really cool plants, especially over time. But in that small area garden, for most of us in a 10-year span, Shishigashira is going to fit perfectly what we need. It's going to provide dynamic color change, dynamic fall color, and give you a lot of architectural interest, even when it's out of leaf.
Now, coming at number 10, we made it all the way down to number 10 from number 20. For our Japanese maples for small gardens, we've got Acer palmatum Red Dragon. And this is almost like what you think of a red weeping lace leaf, but it's got a lot of those characteristics we like about Fire Glow as well. I mean, it gets a little bit of orange red to the backside of the leaf, so when it blows in the wind, the leaves blow, it looks like it shines and glows in the landscape and garden. And on a dwarf weeping red lace leaf, it's perfect for the small garden.
I've said this a few times, but I'll point it out again because it's always fun. And if you don't know it, you're going to remember it every time now. If you turn the leaf sideways, it can kind of look like a Chinese dragon with a beard. Like you kind of get the horns, you kind of get the bottom of the Chinese dragon beard. Cool thing to note there. Beautiful fall colors, great, brilliant reds in the fall. Durable as all get out. Small, typically in that 4 foot tall, 5 foot wide range, so a little bit smaller than trees like Tamukiyama, making it fit into that small area garden even a little bit better than some of the more popular red lace leaves. Now, Red Dragon is certainly popular in its own right. People can say it, so it's easy to locate. But a great plant for the container garden, a great plant for a lace leaf in your landscape where you don't have a lot of room for width. So you don't have room for that larger English lace. You don't have room for something that's going to put on the size of Tamukiyama. Red Dragon's kind of the quintessential smaller red lace leaf.
Now, some people claim that this is a New Zealand or Australian introduction. It was actually an introduction by Dick Wolf of Red Maple Nurseries, and he introduced into the trade and sent plants to Canada. And then, he got real popular for his introduction of Emperor One or Red Emperor. He focused a lot of his effort on that, and sort of Red Dragon fell by the wayside on his production. And then it made it around the world and then started becoming more and more popular because it's such a slow growing weeping red lace leaf. It's one of the slowest growing weeping red lace leaves on the market today. So it fits in a lot of people's gardens because of that nice cascading habit. Doesn't get a lot of width, so it fits in containers. And if you've got that smaller place in your garden that you're just looking for something that's going to just glow and give you some good red color, Red Dragon's the tree that you're going to want.
All right, coming in here at number 9, we've got one of our best small yellows for landscape gardens, Summer Gold. Now, this is a classic 6 foot tall, small, upright, great pink red fall colors, but really what it's known for is that golden yellow, bright yellows, holding that late into the summer. So it'll hold that summer color very well. Anything can get a little bit of green for it right before fall color, but this one's super durable, super colorful, and it's surprising really with Summer Gold that it's so durable because this one can handle a good bit of sun even in a high heat setting, making it perfect for small gardens. You might not have a lot of big trees in your garden, especially in a small area garden. You might not have a lot of late day sun protection. This one can handle a good bit of sun even in areas like Atlanta. As this one gets established, it's very sun tolerant in zone 8. So zone 9 is going to need some protection, but even up to zone 8 typically, very durable.
And Summer Gold in that 6 foot size adds a lot of bright yellow in the garden. If it's a more sunny situation, it's brighter yellow. If it's in a deep shade situation, it's a lime yellow green with more on that yellow side, but it brightens up those dark spaces in the garden in the shadier spots. And in the sunlight, it's just like a highlighter. When you have that yellow color out there in the garden that Summer Gold provides, it brings out all the colors in the greens and contrasts with your reds, your blues, and everything else in the landscape. That color is an underused color in the landscape, and Summer Gold is one of my favorite trees to put out there in the garden to make your whole garden just tie together so well. Summer Gold, awesome tree in that 6-foot size for that small garden to give you that yellow color out there with a nice upright habit. But it's underrated for its fall color. I mean, the fall colors can give you some pink reds that are very dynamic in the landscape as well.
All right, coming in here at number 8, we got Acer palmatum kurohime. This is a classic from Japan. Fairly new plant, but it's still a classic. That smaller habit to it. Love the color patterns it gets to it. You really get a lot of cool pinks with this one. I love it for kind of that midsummer when you get the dynamic greener color you get going on in the older growth with that pinkish new growth. This one's typically 4 to 5 foot, even in 10 years, making it a nice compact tree with a lot of interest.
Yeah, kurohime too has a unique upright habit, and at a young age, it just fits in a small space fairly well, not giving a lot of height that's going to block some vision, but fits in that small garden extremely well. I have noticed with some of our older specimens at Buchholz Nursery, which are some of the oldest trees of kurohime in the country, they can get some width to them with age, and so it'll actually have an upright habit, but then start becoming more shrub-like as it ages. The pink spring color is very dynamic in the early spring when it first leaves out, and the blue-green color it gets midsummer is exceptional. But the purple new growth that's almost like a black purple over top of that during the summer is, to me, what makes this tree really stand out. It gives you some summer interest that you don't get out of many other trees, and in that small compact form, it really steals the show in that summertime.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 7, we've got a coral bark on this list. This is a fun dwarf compact coral bark named by Talon Buchholz. We've got Acer palmatum Little Sango. Now, this one's going to work zone 6 through 9. Nice compact habit, typically 5 foot tall, 5 foot wide, tends to grow in a little bit more of a globe shape. There's a couple different brooms on coral barks. This might be the smallest of them all, though.
Now, with Little Sango, it gives you the bark interest that many Sango kaku and typical coral barks have that everyone loves. You know, they give you that bright red bark that really brighten up that winter drab landscape. And Little Sango does that in a smaller, compact form, fitting in the small garden really well, fitting in containers. Again, make sure you give it good drainage. And this is going to be a tree that can give you some dynamic interest in that winter landscape.
I love it, guys. This is a great plant for the container garden, but we're talking about the small garden today. So this one fits perfect in that that setting too, in the ground. Now, if you have a need for a coral bark, you want some winter interest, you want that lush green spring color, that golden yellow fall color that you get with Sango kaku, but you don't have space for a 20-foot tree. Little Sango fits that perfectly. It's going to give you that miniature coral bark. You're going to get that same winter interest, but in a more multi-stemmed approach too. So it gives you a lot of what you like down low. If you like coral barks, it gives you more branching of that in a smaller setting. Absolutely perfect as a Japanese maple, as opposed to something like a red twig dogwood. You're going to get fall color, spring color, all the beauty of a Japanese maple, but also that bark interest in the winter, which I think is just unbeatable. I mean, I love this for small area gardens, especially as you get like a nice round hedge of one of these. You can really get some nice shapes to this, and you'll really remember this plant. It's easy to maintain, it's easy to grow, and it's one that's going to stand out in the landscape.
Now, coming to number 6, we have Acer palmatum Rhode Island Red. And this is, people think of the blood good upright red Japanese maple. This has that style leaf, but in a compact tight form. So if you're looking for a red Japanese maple with that big leaf, but you have a small garden, Rhode Island Red fits that really well. Typically reaching 4 to 5 feet in height by 5 to 6 foot in width in 10 years in a very dense, compact shrub-like habit.
I'm second guessing this one. I should have put it higher up on the list. I think this one could have moved up higher for me had I really thought about it. I love what this one brings to the table. I mean, a lot of people are looking for a dwarf bloodgood. They look for that upright red, but then they figure out how big bloodgood gets, and they're like, I don't want that. That's too big for my garden. I can't have a tree that size. And Rhode Island Red's the perfect substitute for that. You're still getting that bloodgood size leaf. You're still getting that bloodgood amazing bright red fall color, but in a nice, compact, dense, full habit to it. I absolutely love Rhode Island Red. I think it's beautiful in a container. It really fills out a container and gives you everything you want. I mean, we grow this and we get one in a 10-gallon. You don't have to do anything to it. And by the time it gets to a 10-gallon, it's just the perfect tree. Like, you look at that and you're like, that's perfect. You don't need to shape it. It's dense, it's full, it's compact, it's round, it's got everything you want. Put that in your landscape, you're going to have a little miniature tree right there. It's just perfect looking.
Now, Rhode Island Red has that shape that everyone always wants in their garden. I mean, it's got that compact form and that bigger bloodgood style leaf, and you don't have to prune it to get it that shape.
No maintenance.
No maintenance. It's perfect. It's got that perfect shape all naturally, all by itself. So it's for the low maintenance landscape. It's easy to grow and it's beautiful. Those big red leaves that everyone loves with a blood good, but in a small, compact habit. A selection by Rhode Island Nursery, and they found it at their nursery in Rhode Island. But most people think it's named after the chicken, the little Rhode Island Red, because it's got that compact form.
Love it, man. I'm thinking about getting into chickens. Price of eggs keeps going up. Me and Amy have been talking about chickens. So I don't know, maybe I need me some Rhode Island Red chickens. I saw them on the list of best chickens. So I might be thinking about having a chicken coop next to my Rhode Island Red Japanese maple out here too. Beautiful plant, guys. I love it. And again, typically 5 foot tall, maybe 6 foot, even in a 15-year span. Equally as wide. So you're getting just a nice globe shape there in the garden, and one that you're not going to have to maintain that for. It just grows that way naturally. So I could have been talked into putting this higher up on the list. I love it. Rhode Island Red here at number 6. So now we're into our top 5 Japanese maples for compact gardens, guys, for small space gardens. Some heavy hitters here, some great plants. If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comment section your top 5. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, go over to Mr. Maple Friends on Facebook. Join the conversation there with us. Let us know your top 5 Japanese maples for compact spaces. Let's get into it, Tim. At number 5, we've got the infamous, the great Shana.
Now, Shana was named after our friend Billy Schwartz's daughter, Shana. It's Hebrew for beautiful. And Shana was found as a witch's broom by Dick Wolf at the University of Villanova's campus, the Department of Public Safety. There's this dwarf mutation that happened in a red upright Japanese maple, and basically given to Billy Schwartz to sort of introduce, and is introduced jointly through Red Maple Nurseries, who we talked about earlier. It has a compact form that is amazing and just some really nice red color.
Dr. Creech calls this his best red Japanese maple for Texas, so it's hard to not have it on our list when he sings its praises so well. He's growing trees there in Nacogdoches, Nacogdoches there in eastern Texas. They do have those high pine covers, but he absolutely loves Shana. Make sure it's got good drainage, but beautiful, small, compact red, typically 4x4 and more of a globe shape. It's one of the quintessential red brooms you'll find on a Japanese maple. And there's a lot of red brooms we could talk about. We're also getting into ones that are frequently available on Mr. Maple and ones you can find in the trade. I love Shana. Great pink red fall color. Dense, compact. Now it has that witch's broom, that short and center node, so the middle leaf is kind of the middle part of the node is kind of missing, so you kind of get that bubbly appearance to it, which I think is really unique. It gives it a more interesting texture going on, especially in the small area garden where you can get up and interact with this kind of plant.
And it is one of the slowest growing red compact Japanese maples in the landscape and garden. Now it can give you some pink red colors on new growth in the spring and during the summer. And the fall colors are just amazing on this dwarf compact form as well, making it a tree that's heavily desired for that small garden. Shana coming in number 5. It's a crowd favorite, and you're going to love it as well.
All right, number 4, we've got Acer palmatum Kiyohime. Now, Tim, why would you say Kiyohime is different than Murasaki Kiyohime?
Interesting question, Matt. Kiyohime has a more lateral growth and stays a little bit shorter than Murasaki Kiyohime, which has a more semi-upright and compact form. They're both compact and dense, but Kiyohime definitely has more lateral growth to it, where Murasaki Kiyohime has a semi-upright and horizontal habit. So you'll see Murasaki Kiyohimes as they mature, they've got a little more upright, slightly upright shape, where Kiyohimes are going to be a little bit flatter towards the ground.
See that? That's all. This guy's one of the top experts in the world right there. You see that? Former president of North American Maple Society, Tim Nichols, young guy. Don't mistake him for not experienced. He knows his stuff. I put him on the spot. Guy's an expert here. Loves stuff. I love Kiyohime. That purple border is exquisite in the early spring. The heat tolerance to this one, excellent. Durability, shape, and color are excellent for this one. We call it toadstool maples a lot. Ken was joking with us when he was on our podcast, one of our friends from Alabama, about this being a toadstool shape. He talked about it being a toadstool, and it kind of is more of that small dome. Like, think of this one 4 foot tall, 5 to 6 foot wide. Great for putting under a window or something where you don't want any height. Like, it's not going to be a plant unless you manipulate the shape greatly. Now, you can stake any maple and change the size of them. I'll let people know. I've seen trees changed in Japan, Tamukiyamas that are 30 foot tall because they've been staked continuously and all kinds of funky stuff. But unless you're doing something interesting, this one's never going to be more than 4 to 5 foot tall. Even really mature specimens I've seen of this. I've seen 50-year-old specimens this maybe 5 foot tall and even 50 years. Now, they can get some width to them, but they're not going to put on a ton of height.
I mean, there's some beautiful specimens from the one that was at Gristmill Landscaping to the one at Maple Walk. If you go check out our Maple Walk video, it is an amazing tree. It's heat tolerant, it has really small leaves. It's been really popular for bonsai because the early springtime, the purple red border, compact form, it almost looks like little flowers out there in the landscape. It's heavily desired for containers because it just makes such a beautiful spring interest container out there in the garden. But it's easy to grow, it's extremely beautiful, and it's nice width. It means it's one of those trees that you can put out, underneath your window out there, and it's not going to grow up and block that view, which is really important in the garden because, when you're inside a house, your window is often your view of enjoying your garden from inside your home.
And that's why I put you on the spot with the Murasaki Kiyohime versus Kiyohime. That's a layup for you. I knew it was an easy question for you. But that arching up does make Murasaki Kiyohime a little bit bigger long term than Kiyohime, is why we picked this one for that smaller area garden. The height is a little bit less here.
Now, I will say that I have seen Kiyohime and Kiyohime Yatsubusa. Those are the same plant. So if you see those out there or see that extra word at the end of Kiyohime, just note that's the exact same plant we're talking about. It's a tree that's going to be easy for you to grow, really beautiful, and really durable out there in the garden.
All right, guys, number 3, we picked Acer Palmatum Golden Falls. Now, we easily could have picked any of the different Ryusei styles. It's fun to get a little bit more color in the garden here. So we're picking a yellow. Golden Falls is everything you love about Ryusei and everything you love about Katsura, and then blend them together. I love this plant. Much like Ryusei, you tend to stake this one for its height. So if you don't stake this one up, it tends to be a little bit more of a ground cover, which can be really useful in the small area landscape. So if you have a small garden, you don't want a lot of height, pretty easy. Start out with a low graft on this and don't stake it up. You can get a pretty cool ground cover. A lot of good width going on in here without a lot of height.
And it gives you that yellow color out there in the landscape so well. And because of its heavily cascading pendulous habit, you know what it's going to do. So often people will stake this tree up to 6 to 8 foot and let it cascade and have this fountain-like effect out there in the garden, which is extremely beautiful and heavily desired among many people. And you add the colors that Golden Falls provides out there in the landscape as well. That springtime when it's golden yellow with a red border like Katsura. And then after that, you get that yellow color in the landscape that I love so much about summer gold that I mentioned earlier. But on this weeping habit, you have a tree that really puts on a show and becomes a specimen that everyone's going to talk about.
Now, if you're in a small area garden and you have any kind of elevation change, this is a great plant for a bank and kind of letting it take the bank a little bit, kind of let it weep down the bank or hang over a rock. So you don't necessarily have to have garden space for this one. You can actually have it hang over a crevice, over a rock in the garden. You can really get creative with the siding of this one because it's so malleable. Now, if you have a small area garden where you don't have a lot of room for elevation change, this type of shape is also very useful because it evokes that kind of mountainous terrain look to it. So you can create different, especially when in leaf, different kind of plateaus with the eye. So you can kind of look at the garden and get these little mounds going on. So you might not have a lot of room for, changing around your whole landscape and building, all these areas for topiaries. But with something like Golden Falls, you can actually get a very creative and have some different flow, kind of take the eye through the garden rather than everything being the same kind of tier.
Now, coming at number 2, we've got a newer Japanese maple, one of the newer trees that got up pretty high on our list. We've got the red lion's head. That's Acer Palmatum Kurenai-jishi.
Absolutely love it. Kurenai-jishi, beautiful, typically 4 to 5 foot, making it one of the smaller ones on this list. Durable, really leaves out a bold red. You can get some greener, older growth in it midsummer, but then kind of red highlights over it. Interesting twist to the leaf. I love it in the fall, though. I talk about this a lot, but the fall reminds me a lot of Shishikashira. That's when it actually, I think, is in that lion's head family the most. In the fall, this thing can just light up with orange, with red and yellow throughout it, giving it kind of the same kind of essence of fall that you get from Shishikashira in a small, compact habit. Perfect tree for bonsai, perfect tree for small area container gardening, and therefore great for the small area garden. It's not going to take up a lot of room. It's going to bring high interest. And again, a lot of interest that's easy to interact with. Like, I think this is a tree that I like to plant somewhere near a pathway, near an area where I'm going to be close to it. I like to walk up and actually look at this plant. It's not one of those plants I need like on a bank or a hillside. I need this up close where I can interact with it. And that's kind of what some of the smaller area gardens do. You want plants that are going to be intimate. They're close in your interaction level in a small garden.
Now with Kurenai-jishi, you're going to want to give it some sunlight. That really peaks up some of the colors. You can really get some of those brick reds out of Kurenai-jishi with that brick bold red that you don't get out of many other Japanese maples. The color is unique itself, but the twisting leaf is really where it gets the name of. It's got that, people think that Shishigashira-like habit. To me, I remember when this was the tree every nurseryman was after. There was rumors of the red lion's head in Japan, and everybody was chasing after it. Our friend Masayoshi Yano, who had World Maple Park, good friend of ours who passed away recently, an expert when it comes to Japanese maples. This was found by one of his friends, and he put that name Kurenai Jishi on it. And when it came over to the United States about 2008, it hit the market, and it's been super popular ever since because it is so dynamically beautiful. I remember being in New Jersey at Ed Shin's when he had one of the first ones in the ground, and us taking photos of his tree. And it was just one of those trees I was just like, that is so beautiful. That is amazing. And, we got that tree and got it into production, and it is one of those trees that fits in that small garden. It doesn't take up a lot of width, and it just becomes one of those trees that is uniquely special that grabs your attention. And that's why we have gardens. You make it interesting. That's why we love gardening. And this is one of those trees that's going to make your garden interesting.
I believe it's Mark Wethington who we've interviewed on here. It says, life's too short for boring plants. Couldn't agree more. It's a great quote. Coming here at number one, a lot of you guys can guess it. It's number one on a lot of lists for a lot of good reasons. It's the Makawa Yatsubusa. It's King Makawa. No shocker here. A lot of people call the office. I used to be the number one person that answered the phone. So I used to answer the phones first here at Mr. Maple. Thank God we've got a great staff now, so I don't have to answer the phone first. Thank you. That's my favorite thing that's ever happened. But I did love the interactions. And one of the things that people would ask pretty frequently, even when they called in the middle of the night, people called. It used to be my cell phone. So if they called, I got the phone at 11:30, and I'd answer it too. But anyway, people would call and they would say, I'm looking for a bonsai tree. I want to plant a bonsai tree in my yard. And I got so tired of explaining that so many different trees could be used for bonsai, I would just say, yeah, we grow those. It's called Makawa Yatsubusa. And for most people, that's perfectly what they're looking for because it's small, it's compact, it's got a dense habit to it, it's got interesting structure. It's one of the perfect trees for the small area garden.
Now, many of y'all may be familiar with our top 5 Japanese maples that we do on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube. But we've been asking people their favorite Japanese maples for years. In fact, Matt made when he was on the board for the executive branch before he was the actual president of the Maple Society, he also made the Maple of the Year program with the North American branch of the Maple Society.
So basically people would vote on their favorite tree each year. The board would make some recommendations, and then the whole membership was supposed to vote on what they like best.
And this is academia, nurserymen, and maple collectors from all over the United States. Makawa Yatsubusa won the very first award in 2014.
Doubled up everything else too on the votes.
Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing tree. It's easy to grow. It's beautiful. It gives that lively feel, but the texture of that tightly layering, larger green leaf, that's that chartreuse green, is so appealing and so interesting as a dwarf compact form. Y'all, Makawa Yatsubusa, if you don't have it, try to get it because we always try to offer this on MrMaple.com and make this tree available. It's one of our favorite dwarf Japanese maples for that small garden.
Now, we're doing tons of variations of this, from Munkawa to Red Panda. There's all kinds of interesting variations on it. Makawa was the first, though, and it's so awesome. Like, whenever I would ask nurserymen their favorite tree, they'd be like, I don't know, kid, get out of here. But then they would say, well, if they really put me on the spot, maybe Makawa Yatsubusa. That was most people's answer. Like, if people really thought about what their favorite Japanese maple was, it was like 9 out of 10 times nurserymen come back and said, probably Makawa. And it's for good reason. It's heat tolerant. It's durable. It's not the fastest growing plant. So it's not like the money maker of like, oh, this gets 20 foot in 5 years and you can sell a giant one for a ton of money. It's really not that. It's a slow growing, long-term investment in the garden. But once you have a mature Makawa Yatsubusa, anything over 10 years, it's such a presence in the landscape. You get a 10-year plus Makawa in the landscape, people really gravitate to that. Even on a leaf, it has such an interesting architecture to it. It's one that's typically only about 5 foot tall in 10 years. You get anything in that 20-foot range, and you've got, or 20-year range, you've got a talking piece in the garden that people are just in awe of.
Yeah, Makawa Yatsubusa, it's so interesting. In that 10 to 15-year range, you'll often have a tree that puts up different, almost like arms out there in the landscape. And with that tightly layering habit, it looks like a lively green creature out there. So it's one of those plants that everyone just instantly falls in love with because it seems animal and creature-like out there. while also looking like a big bonsai. I mean, you add that stuff together and it's just a really cool tree to add a unique interest.
I've actually had macaws talk to me in the garden. It's something people don't talk about. It's like I'm like the Dr. Doolittle of macaws. They interact with me. They actually do speak to me in the garden. So guys, I love today's list. These are trees for small, compact spaces. If you love Japanese maples, you got to be subscribed to our podcast. We talk about cool and interesting plants every single week on the podcast. We put out 7 days a week content on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube also. Go to your favorite podcast platform. Give us 5 stars. It's a great way for other gardeners to find us. We really appreciate it if you share it with other gardeners as well. We're a niche market here, so we love it when you take this and you say, hey, let me send this to my East Mecklenburg Garden Club. You know, I've got a group here of people who would probably like to hear about these trees for small, compact gardens. That helps us out so much, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you all for jumping in today. Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.